Eamon, this couple, the Chipers, I have to say, Chiper. Okay, so we're going to, that's, you've obviously Googled that. Yeah, the Chipers would suggest that they were, part of a fish and chip kind of network and were earning an honest living. They're not, they're Chipers, and they were not earning an honest living at all. They're the latest targets of the Criminal Assets Bureau, and you've been writing about them. The thing about them is Natalia and Edward Chiper, okay? They've a bit of taste. I like the kind of places they were going on holidays, bit different, not the same old Costa del Sol type thing, Canada, Iceland, interesting destinations. I'm a little bit less impressed with the house.
Miami Beach as well, don't forget.
Miami Beach, yeah. No, I like their style.
You were at Disney.
Yeah.
But you weren't impressed with the house?
Not impressed with the house.
Well, it was bought as a shell in, I think it was 2014, and for about 200,000, and they put nearly £1 million then into it.
Into that?
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen the photographs on sundayworld.com, but there's these big ornate gates, which I know somebody who's involved in gate making and said you wouldn't get anywhere near without spending at least €20,000.
Right.
So they also, in the cab case, they also kind of went through some of the spending on the house. Like there was €126,000 of a dog run. So you wondered...
And you got the dog, you caught the dog on camera, the poor little guy. Did you get his name?
We caught one of them. No, we didn't hang around to introduce ourselves, in fairness.
You didn't put a little strip over his eyes.
He looked friendly enough, but it was mentioned that when Cab did their initial raid, when they were caught with nearly £1 million worth of cannabis. Well, it wasn't Cab who did the raid, it was the organised drugs unit or organised crime and drugs unit. And there was 4 guard dogs essentially, and Natalia was there, and she kind of called the dogs in and let the guards go in and do their searches and all the rest. But that was there's a lot of it was a very secure compound.
So there was a dog run that cost 100,000. Is that what you said?
There was a dog run, yeah. That was 126,000, I think it was, yeah. So I mean, they must have got the OPW to do it.
What is that? It's like it, yeah. They probably did. But, what is that? It's just a little fenced-in area.
I don't know. I didn't get to see pictures of it, and it wasn't visible from the gate. You couldn't see it, but presumably, it was a high-end dog run. Like there were big dogs as well, Akita, Japanese Akita, and I think 2 others. And while the guards were kind of searching, and after they found the cannabis, like a work crew turned up, and they were in the middle of doing up the new tennis court, which they figured was going to cost about 40 grand. So there was a tennis court going in there as well. And there was a lot of...
So it's called the White House, and I hope we have pictures going up as we're, for any of those viewing this podcast on YouTube. We should have photographs of it. Did they call it the White House, or was it? I mean, it is obviously slightly.
It was all, as far as I could see, because it's in a townland called Tullyard, which is about 7 kilometres north of Drogheda, and I looked at the kind of the previous planning applications.
I swear to God, I've been at this house,
and it always
I have. It's so familiar to me.
And it was always referred to as the White House at Tullyard. So I'm not sure if they named it or the previous owner, but I think the previous owner I didn't think got to the point where it was finished. So I doubt it was their choice. So I'd imagine it was the Chipers had decided they were doing their own version of Pennsylvania Avenue, which was going to be in.
So when did they move in?
Well, it was bought around 2014, and this is coming at a time when there was a lot of heavy spending. Like this is when they were doing all the, the various trips and had access to a nice Porsche sports car in Moldova, where they're from, and we're using a luxury villa over there. Which all of this wouldn't have been part of the cab case against them, but it was part of their, I suppose, their body of evidence to show that they lived a lifestyle that was way beyond their means. Like he was essentially holding himself out as a painter, and they used this company called KED Decor Limited. But it seems that everyone employed in that, or certainly there was at least 4 people named in the evidence affidavits as employees of this company, and they were all Moldovan. Some of them they think are related to them one way or another, and they were getting basically their wages were going to them, but it was. Their bank cards were in the White House, so they didn't necessarily have access to this cash. And there was other evidence about some of these guys who've been caught with, bags of money in the airport. People were caught with cannabis in the UK in previous years. So it was all part of a long kind of pattern of criminality, and that, this whole idea that he was a painter decorator just didn't stack up. And that was essentially the cab case.
A big operation, obviously, are suspected. to be a big operation.
Like in terms of the criminal operation run by Eddie Chiper, it looks like it was, because the guards mentioned in their evidence that when they started to investigate them, they were getting information from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, as well as the maritime analysis people as well, who look at all the way drugs are shipped across the Atlantic. And they basically described their modus operandi as buying the drugs in Portugal and using sailboats then to cross into other parts of Europe with that. And then the drugs were then distributed, both to Moldova, to Russia, and to Ireland.
Right.
So like they were quite, they were
too strange, sort of. Well, I mean, obviously they're originally from Moldova. They've obviously been living in Ireland for a few decades.
They were like over 20 years, and they have 3 children, all of whom were born here in Ireland.
Right.
But they had, like, even further back, like, he was stopped in a Porsche Cayenne in 2006. It was a Moldovan registered, and on the second occasion it was taken off him because he obviously hadn't gotten around to paying the duty. And then there was another, they mentioned another case where they had bought a high-end car, I think it was a Range Rover, and they'd bought it on finance, but suddenly the next time this Range Rover turned up, it was at a port in Spain where a former London Met policeman who had been hired by insurance companies to look at these cars going to North Africa spotted this one as being a potential car where there was still outstanding finance on it, and it was seized and brought back. Now, there was no charges or anything like that brought against the Chipers, and there was never any criminal charges brought against them here in terms of the drug seizure either. It was whatever it was, 47 kilos of cannabis that was found packed in pallets that were made to look like
at the White House.
At the White House, in the garage. And it was basically on the basis that other workmen had access to that garage. And while there was a lot of CCTV in the kind of the house and the compound, like in the kind of the whole site, none of it was actually on the garage. And Natalia's story to the guards was that she only ever went in there like just to get meat for the dogs. And sometimes she'd go in to give Edward his coffee or whatever. And when she asked about the pallets that had arrived in which the drugs are found, she was told, like, it's got nothing to do with you, mind your own business. And that she was just claiming that she was very much just a housewife who was told to clean. And, she just cleaned the house and that was her duty. And she claimed that her accountancy degree that she got in a Moldovan university was in fact was basically bogus. That she claimed that her father had bribed somebody in the university to give her accreditation, and that she never was an accountant. But
okay,
so we don't really know. Really,
what
was
about
she an accountant
Edward?
Or a housewife?
Then he wasn't charged in relation to the cannabis either. Even though
he wasn't there when the drug squad arrived.
Right,
and he basically he was gone for a month, and the guards in their evidence say that they suspect at this point he might have been moving assets out of their reach. And then when he did come back, he didn't really say anything. I think there was 4 interviews, and he more or less kept stum.
So the drugs probably been delivered while he was away.
No, well, we don't know that. I mean, he could have just missed them.
It was obviously not provable when they were delivered. Basically,
no, they didn't have exact. I mean, they were acting on intelligence, and they found the majority of them in these kind of plastic containers within these pallets. I think it was doors or something like that, and then there was a small amount in a loft area as well. But there was all the kind of the paraphernalia like vacuum packing and stuff like that. Like this was, an operation. It wasn't, it wasn't a one-off. This was an organised cannabis smuggling group. Now, they say they are also involved in distribution of cocaine and firearms as well. That's how they were characterised. And they did a breakdown of some of the other gang members, all Moldovans, and about which ones kind of carried out which role in the gang. And that Eddie Chiper was considered, he was pretty much considered the leader of it. So we basically have this guy who was quietly living in just outside of Drogheda, to all intents and purposes. He was a successful painter, decorator, company owner.
Until the guards, the National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau burst in January 2019. And had you come across him before? Or
no. I mean,
sort of the first
story we did was the first time they got listed on CAB. You had a story just about them, and literally it was their court appearances over the drug seizure at that time. They both of them spent a little bit of time. And they got bail, and then the charges were dropped. I think the DPP obviously felt that there was too much of a wide open gap there, that somebody else, they could have successfully made the argument that somebody else might have put the drugs there and they had nothing to do with it. Presumably that was the thinking behind it. So we had, that was all we had, and we just had some of their picks. And of course, all the evidence of their luxurious lifestyle, like, kind of coincided with one of their kind of social media pages, and it was all the exact same places, you know. And so they're the photographs we used.
They were quite openly living like this, I suppose, under the guise of having this painting decorating firm. They were having a very lavish lifestyle between Ireland and Moldova, driving around in Porsche cars. Over an 18-month period, the Criminal Assets Bureau found they spent 29,000 on travel alone. And this is where I go, interesting spots.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does look nice. I'm sure, like everyone else, they're guilty of a bit of impression management, you know, where you kind of put your best foot forward. I mean, she's always done up to the nines in these pictures and has the front foot out and hand on the hip. And, you know, and the kids are all, you know, cutie dressed and all the rest of it. And he's a fit looking character himself. I mean, one of our younger website colleagues kind of tripped me up on this last week. He says, you keep referring to this as a young couple, Eamon. So they're in their 40s.
Yeah, it's just had quite a bit of work.
All right, okay. Young to me.
But one of the visits was to Alberta, Canada. They stayed in the Jasper Park Lodge. They went...
This picture of them on their jet skis out in the snow.
Okay. They went to Miami in the US, where they stayed in an €800 a night spot called the Casa Fiena.
You must know it, do you?
Might. I don't actually, of course. But Reykjavik is a place I wouldn't mind going to. 3-night stay costing 4,100. And obviously Euro Disney, which wouldn't be for me anymore. I'm past my Euro Disney years. But yeah, interesting places. And I mean, that's really just a kind of a glimpse into what was going on. And they also seem to have use of, they're calling it a luxurious mansion in Moldova. And these Porsche cars. Now, is that mansion in Moldova, they obviously can't get to the bottom of the ownership of that.
Well, it's. I mean, they'd have to rely on, I suppose, local authorities in a place like Moldova to help them on that. But if there's no, I mean, the guards can't necessarily get evidence, you know, from a country like Moldova, or indeed any foreign country. They have to find the evidence here. Like, you know, so if money was transferred here and used to purchase somewhere else, they could say, well, look, we know that you used money taken from here and it was bought in Moldova, but they won't be able to seize that property anyway. No. But again, it'll form part of the case against them, so that, you know, the High Court judge here, or the High Court will hear that here's these people whose official, you know, income never gets beyond 26,000 a year are spending, you know, hundreds of thousands on property elsewhere. Yeah,
this is a very clear picture
and that's
put
all
before
part
the
of
judge.
That pattern, yeah. So that there's no way out for them in that sense. Like, you know, they can't say, look, it was bought with, you know, honest money. You know, we hear this all the time with the different cases, like, you know, whether it's a compensation claim or, you know, a lucky win on the horses or whatever. Like, you do actually have to be able to prove that.
Prove it, yeah.
Say it.
And of course, the cab case sort of found that in the 16 years before the raid in 2019, a revenue officer worked out that Eddie Chiper's annual income average was 26,000, and that the wife was getting 13,800.
Yeah.
So between them, they were on, you know, about 40,000.
Yeah.
And living
less than the single average industrial wage. And yet had this fantastic house and all this lovely travel.
Yeah, it doesn't add up, does it?
We're driving a nice, very nice cars, and of course the Mercedes that was seized as part of the settlement. So I mean, what Joe Jones then more or less said, he kind of but he kind of gave effect to the settlement, made an order then that the house is basically a Section 3. It's proceeds of crime, and the Bureau will get to take that over at a later date, and they've agreed on that date. And when it's sold, then the couple are going to get 10% back.
Right.
And there is going to be no costs against them. But other than that, I mean, you know, it's essentially the evidence against them has been accepted. So
is there any suggestion there was 31 transactions, I think, totaling nearly 300,000 credited to a bank account in Moldova, is that right, or in Ireland, between March and July 2016?
Yeah, this is money that was kind of sent.
That was coming into the country.
Was coming into the country, and that was used for the initial 200,000 to buy the White House, or to buy the unfinished property that was.
And was there evidence there was money going the other direction out of Ireland into
and there was
Moldova?
money going the other way as well. So it was moving both ways depending on what way things were going, but. In terms of the bank accounts, though, like they're spending that the money they were using that was coming through bank accounts is coming from Moldova. So presumably the cash that was being made here or made elsewhere was going into places in Moldova. And then they were using the various bank accounts of different employees of KED Decor then to move money around as well. So that was the other side of it.
Are they likely, do you think, to return to Moldova or to stay here?
It's a good question. I don't know. Like we're going to find out. I mean,
here a long time.
It doesn't sound like they're in any hurry. I mean, I suppose, like, you know, if you're part of, I suppose, being a successful international drug dealer is that nobody knows you're a successful international drug dealer. So, I mean, that was probably, I mean, you wonder sometimes that, you know, say foreign gangs or foreign criminals who come here, it's a way of getting away from any heat at home, or it's a way of kind of being able to move around easier, that if you're coming from, you know, a city or a place that might have a reputation and you're traveling into Spain, you're going to attract more attention. But if you're traveling, you know, to Spain from Ireland and you're resident here, and presumably you know your kids have Irish passports, you're going to look like you're a more honest back. You know, it looks like a more plausible background or cover story, like, you know. So I mean, it does. I mean, it's obviously screws their options a little bit. I mean, it's going to be difficult for them not to attract attention, like in that sense.
And why are the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the US, why do they know of Chiper?
It was part of the way it was phrased was as part of the investigation into the gang. The guards got assistance from the DEA as well as the Maritime Analysis and Operations Centre, which we know, like there's various Irish naval officers have been involved in that, and they've been kind of critical in tracking, I suppose, Atlantic crossings, you know, bringing, you know, ships and vessels bringing cocaine or drugs from wherever it is, West Africa into Europe, and from South America to West Africa or directly into Europe. And I mean, they also had the Moldovan Ministry of Internal Affairs help them as well, and I think they helped them with a certain amount of nicknames and the hierarchy of the gang. They were able to give them, I suppose, a kind of a briefing as to who he was and where his role was in the I suppose the criminal hierarchy.
It seems extraordinary that the gang existed and presumably was operating over a long period of time between Ireland and Moldova, and they did seem to stay under the radar for at least, I mean, you're at least talking 10 or more years, 15 years. Yeah,
well, they certainly, I mean, Jesus, in terms of like media, it wasn't that they stayed under the radar, they were just unheard of.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there were interactions with guards, like, you know, with the seized Porsche and the kind of and the missing Range Rover and stuff like that. But, you know, it wasn't necessarily kind of actionable information that they had really but I'm sure, like, you know, if they figure like they're going after them, like when for whatever reason, however the original kind of move came to raid them and find the 47 kilos of cannabis, that, you know, part of that then was reaching out to these other foreign agencies or, you know, enforcement agencies to get a bigger picture of who they were dealing with, and it seems to have worked out successfully. Now, where that information came before the raid or after the raid, we don't know. I presume I would imagine it came before the raid, and that kind of helped them. It was, you know, it's kind of, when you're dealing, I guess, with people that don't have a background in Ireland, you're going to need some kind of cooperation with, you know, police and enforcement agencies abroad to give you some idea of what you're dealing with. I'm
looking forward to the White House going up for sale, because that's one I really want to see in behind the whole door of. I want to see those pictures.
Well, I want to
see that dog run. 120,000 for the dogs to not roam the land, is it?
Well, you see, two of them were allowed to roam. They were let out of the dog run at night, so it was very much, they were guard dogs, so that if anyone turned up unexpectedly,
they would savage them.
Well, or at the very least, I'm sure they'd bark. Well, we can't know for sure. Innocent dog, you know. But like, I do remember when we went up to take a pic. You know, it was all Leylandi around the side. Like Ernie did a nice pic there at the front door, but it was literally, that was the only angle you could get, because it was covered by high hedges, and you could see behind the Leylandi where the kind of, you know, the palisade steel fencing. So I mean, it was like it was like a secure warehousing. You know, it'd be like if you had a commercial yard somewhere and you were worried about people getting in to steal your car, whatever. You have this palisade fencing up. So they had the palisade fencing, the guard dogs, and a load of cameras.
Element of paranoia there if you're using your actual home land for your
Yeah, well, I imagine if you're
warehousing as well.
Moldovan
Depending on what you're
dealers
involved in, like, but yeah.
don't survive without being a little bit paranoid.
Maybe not. Right, well look, I look forward to that house going up for sale, and we'll definitely be back here to have a look behind the whole door there. Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure.